welcome back to the podcast history of our world. Chapter 5: Neolithic Revolution. Right around that 10,000 BC mark, humanity entered a period of time now called the Neolithic Period, or New Stone Age. Things are going to start feeling more and more familiar now as we start transitioning away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Of course, this can't happen without easy access to food, and there are now so many people that wild sources of food just aren't cutting it anymore. Berries take time to grow back, fruit trees have to be located and protected from wild animals, and game can easily be overhunted. The oceans offer a bounty of sustenance, but so far most of it remains inaccessible. This way of life simply cannot continue. The only course is a new revolutionary way of thinking. An agricultural revolution. Often referred to as the Neolithic Revolution to encompass the wider changes in lifestyle, the greatest hallmark is the discovery and promulgation of farming, or agriculture. By definition, this is the cultivation of animals and plants for food, fibers, hides, medicine, materials, and any other uses. But it's also about removing humanity from the natural food order. We are the ones in control, not the ebb and flow of nature. Interestingly, many societies around the world all seem to have developed agriculture within a few thousand years of each other. And this was without contact, of course. That said, the area which first developed farming goes to Southwest Asia and the Levant, as well as the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, all around the 10,000 to 9,000 year mark. Mesopotamia especially, kinda lovingly referred to as the cradle of civilization, was always credited as the first region. Although there seems to be recent evidence from Papua New Guinea that taro cultivation began around 11,000 BC. But hey, facts are stubborn things, right? Sure. Humanity bonded to certain crops depending on the region, like rice production as early as 8,000 BC in Pengdoshan in China, and potatoes in the Peruvian highlands between 8 and 5,000 BC. Most of the time, it was just taking what you already liked and simply making more of it. But then there's the curious case from Mesoamerica, which seems at first a weird and downright crazy thing, but ultimately becomes one of humanity's, if not the most impressive agricultural achievement. The ancient Mesoamericans took the wild, practically inedible grass teosinte, selectively bred out the undesirable traits for over 6,000 years, and from it created maize, corn. A necessary foodstuff for them, and in the modern world, we too are completely dependent on it. Which is somewhat ironic because corn cannot exist without direct human involvement. All those little kernels are trapped within a tight husk, making escape nearly impossible. And even if a huskless cob fell to the ground, those kernels would simply die from overcrowding, their roots choking each other to reach the soil. It is, as many botanists call it, a hopeless monster. But man, if it isn't awesome grilled up elote style, with a little mayo and chili powder, and some cotija cheese, so good. Back to the prehistoric world, where aside from those isolated individual plants, much of the earliest farmland from North Africa to India was based around the domestication of a few crops that were so critical to early mankind's diet, they get a fancy name. The 8 founder crops: emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, barley, lentil, peas, chickpea, bitter vetch, and flax. And you know what? Hang on a second. This all sounds like a lot of work here. Sure, there are more people around eating all the wild food, but when has that ever stopped a nomadic group? If the food in an area dries up, then just pack your bags and keep moving. Why on earth would anyone want to give up all this just to slave away under the hot sun in a field? Well, are you ready for some more theories? Of course you are. Why am I even asking? Number 1. Supply and demand. This is a catch-all theory that encompasses things like climate change and population growth. Because of various reasons, wild food grew scarce and many hungry mouths demanded more. This necessity was the impetus needed to start cultivating crops and domesticating animals. Only problem with this theory is that if people are hungry, they're going to spend their time and energy towards finding immediate sources of nourishment. Why bury your last grains of barley now to wait 4 months for food then, when you can eat it immediately and not starve? Number 2. The Eureka factor. Some observant person noticed plants growing from discarded seeds at garbage sites, graves, or wherever they were tossed out, put two and two together, told everyone else to intentionally plant seeds in the ground, and voila, food. Plausible, but unlikely. Next. Number 3. The natural way. Proponents of this one don't like the term revolution, but evolution. Hunter-gatherers would have been familiar with how wild plants sprout up, or how seeds can grow, and would have learned to make the transition from foraging to harvesting. Agricultural evolution is just a natural product of humanity's intellect. Give us a couple thousand years, and eventually we'll figure out that the seeds go in the ground. Fourth and last as to why agriculture developed is also my favorite theory. Ask yourself, why would anyone intentionally endure backbreaking work from sunrise to sunset, all to just grow barley? I mean, barley's alright, I guess. Doesn't really have the celebrity power of quinoa or the restaurant allure of farro, but this humble little grain has a special secret. Barley becomes beer. The theory goes that beer is good. And lots of beer is really good. People start farming in order to stay well supplied with beer. Problem is, there's a lot of work that goes into brewing. You need lots of barley, vessels to store them in, so someone's going to have to invent pottery, easy sources of fresh water, something to boil that water, other vessels to store the barley water mix, now called wort, someone to oversee all this, and of course, the time to let it all ferment. There's a lot of specialized jobs here that a hunter-gatherer society just isn't capable of handling. So in addition to creating a need for agriculture, beer also creates a need for permanent settlements for the brewers to work in. If successful, these settlements could grow in size until, hey, you've got a small city on your hand. The word for city in Latin is civitas, from where we get the word civilization. And if my impeccable logic is correct, which it is of course, beer is therefore responsible for civilization. Boom, case closed. Not quite, because who is responsible for beer? Well, remember last episode when I hinted that women were responsible for the greatest invention in the world? Here you go. Women were the singular force behind beer for most of our shared history. They were the ones who no doubt worked the fields and discovered the effervescent mysteries. Right off the bat, in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, women were the only ones allowed to brew beer, as both a religious duty and as a requirement of the law. Even in medieval England, where female brewers, brewster being the correct term, made and sold much of the beer as a profitable but necessary public service. Yeah, because would you want to drink the water back then? Exactly. Women gave us beer, and beer gave purpose and reason for humanity to progress far beyond what our distant ancestors could even dream of. So a toast! Here's to the brewsters throughout history. Thanks for saving civilization as we know it. Chin chin. Wait, people want to dispute this? The beer part, not the woman part, I'm assuming, right? Well, yes, there are arguments to be made that beer is not the focal point of agriculture and is, in fact, a happy but simple byproduct. The chain of events goes that early farmers, most likely women, first had no idea what to do with the wild cereal grains they encountered. They first tried boiling the leaves and stalks, but this tasted awful, so they moved on to the kernels by cooking them over direct heat. What they discovered was that certain grains, corn and sorghum for example, produce a delicious pop treat. Fun, but they didn't stop there. They ground up the dried, uncooked kernels into a powder and mixed in boiled water, creating gruel. Still not very appetizing, but okay. Although looking at the ground-up powder gave someone else a different idea. They mixed it with less water this time and cooked it instead, creating the first unleavened flatbread. But wait, someone else was messing around with the sticky dough mixture but got called away to take care of something. When they came back, they discovered the dough had expanded in size and risen. Cooking that mixture resulted in bread that was warm, fluffy, but most of all, a delicious success. Early bakers obviously had no idea that wild yeast in the air was responsible for the leavening process, but it didn't matter. They quickly learn that if you let dough rest outside, it will rise, and if you bake that, you get bread. And finally, at the end of this process, comes the discovery of beer. It goes like this: we had a good harvest this year, so let's put the barley in this here pot and leave it outside for storage. And then you come back to it and aw man, rain got in the pot and the barley sprouted. And then shortly after that, no one remembered to put the lid back on and more rain got in the pot and drowned the seedlings, which stopped the germination process. Wild yeast moves in, and eventually some courageous or really dumb person looks at this funky looking and smelling water and thinks, I'm gonna drink that. It couldn't have tasted that good, and it probably wasn't too safe to drink either. But, the golden age of discovery. So, it tasted bad. But on the plus side, that noble soul got nice and plastered. From there on, it was just a matter of experimenting with recipes and techniques until beer is born. Simply the result of loose-fitting pots and too much grain. Hey, both theories aren't bad, but I'll leave it up to you which one you think is better. Just ask yourself, would you rather have a pita or a pilsner? The advantages of farming have provided bountiful food and drink, but at a cost. Wild food tends to be more nutritious than farmed food, especially so back then. And without a variety of foods to eat, the newly sedentary humans begin another physical change. Their height decreases, bones aren't as thick, and teeth and jaws continue to shrink. To make up for this nutritional loss, there's more high-caloric food available, quantity over quality, but you need lots of land to grow this food on and lots of people to work it. Acquiring these resources is something else altogether. People you can make the old-fashioned way, or, as is a common thread throughout our history, they can be enslaved. Land is plentiful at this point, but sooner or later boundaries will be drawn, and if you've built your city on high-quality land, expect invaders to come a-knocking. And for that matter, the population surplus you've got going on means all those city dwellers are at a new risk of invasion, from disease. It's not enough that all these people are now packed so close together in these cities. They've even brought their farm animals with them, and some diseases jump species. Oh, and don't get me started about how agriculture brings about the stratification of society. Before all this, life was so egalitarian, and everyone had their role to keep the tribe safe and secure. Now there are social classes, and rich warlords and priests, and even slaves. Ugh, let's just forget it all and head back to Walden Pond. Well, I can't just also use beer as the excuse for what's good about civilization and agriculture. I'll also mention that freeing up people to not produce food is the only way any kind of technological, scientific, artistic, or educational progress can be made. But I leave you with one last side effect of the agricultural revolution. Okay, so that part about humans getting smaller and weaker? Well, only with a modern, well-balanced diet have humans returned to their pre-Stone Age height. Although through the process of domesticating plants and animals, we have inadvertently domesticated ourselves. It's true, we've lost our wild edge, and the way you can tell the difference between a wild animal and a domesticated one is in the eyes. Go ahead, compare images of dogs and wolves, cats and tigers, pigs and boars. There's this weird, sleepy, doughy look that all domesticated animals get, and no one's quite sure why. Now go look at chimps and humans, for example. Remember that they're our closest genetic relatives, and the only comparison we can make for this example, but, just some food for thought. So with all of these developments, settlements are looking a lot less like villages and more like towns, and even small cities. There's quite a few places we could start our history journey on, but sometimes the traditional way works best. So that said, let's move out of anthropology land and begin our trip through time in Anatolia and Southwest Asia. Located here is the famous Neolithic site Göbekli Tepe, Belly Hill in Turkish, and the oldest religious structure known to man. Who built this almost 9,000-year-old structure? Why are the massive limestone walls adorned not with images of traditional cave painting animals like deer and oxen, but scorpions, snakes, and even spiders? It remains a mystery to those who study it, although it's incredible evidence of an early and complex Neolithic society. Staying close in Anatolia and southeast of Konya is the 32-acre site Çatalhöyük. Still Neolithic, but this time it's a village from around 8000 BC, most famous for its city planning. Houses appear to have been built so close to each other that people got around by walking on rooftop. They also seem to be really into a bull cult and buried their dead within the confines of the village, like as in under people's houses. Not too much is known about this place, but it seemed to support a population of about 10,000 and must have been an important trading destination. These two locations are gaining a lot of ground in academic circles and the public consciousness, offering a glimpse into a world that is even now seemingly unbelievable. Yet there is one city with Neolithic roots whose name is famous throughout the world, a storied place whose famed walls repelled numerous invaders before collapsing under curious circumstances. I'm referring, of course, to Jericho. The biblical city was founded near a freshwater spring by the Natufian culture, a semi-sedentary people from the Levant. The earliest dates put the founding at around 9600 BC, and in 200 years, Jericho had swelled to over 1,000 people, already complete with massive stone walls and towers, defensive structures not seen in other Neolithic sites. This level of safety and protection turned Jericho into a commercial powerhouse. Traders from all over came to exchange their goods and wares, and no doubt ideas as well. It was in a city like Jericho where another game-changing invention came about: the wheel. Yes, everyone has this notion of a grunting caveman standing in front of a big stone circle, but in truth, the wheel was invented rather late, somewhere between 9500 and 6500 BC, and would not have been used for transportation. Its first use would be as a potter's wheel, drastically speeding up their work. Other inventions like the loom, the oven, and the millstone would continue to ensure cities like Jericho grew and prospered. All this success could attract unwanted visitors, which is why walled cities like Jericho, which knew the value of defense, could be spared an invasion. But other unprotected towns weren't so lucky. Those who survived marauders or bandit attack and weren't enslaved would be forced to flee and take their chances in foreign and unknown lands. It would be one of those bands of people on the move who built a series of towns in a land between the two rivers to become one of history's oldest and greatest civilizations. Next time, we join up with these people and try to make sense of why they chose to settle down in a muddy land where the weather was unpredictable, the rivers could change their course at any time, and a flood of biblical proportions was not out of the question. Oh, it sounds great. Everyone needs a challenge now and then, right? Yet in spite of the adversity, these people tamed the land, gave us the world's oldest epic, after they invented writing, of course, and built cities with magnificent ziggurat pyramids. All in a region where the most abundant natural resource won't be valuable for another 7,000 years. In their own language, they are the Unsung Giga, the black-headed people. To us, they are the Sumerians, and their time has come on the podcast history of our world.